So I figure if you buy something, you get to call it whatever you like. But anytime I call gold and silver an investment, I end up having to explain my vocabulary. So I guess we know what this one's about. Okay, so we're going to take this one back just a little bit and cover why a person might want to save with physical metals in the first place. On one hand, this is the most basic level in this whole category, this whole topic. It's also the most important though, especially if you're new. So the easiest way to go about this is to just tell you why and maybe how I do it. But I try to look at this from a few different angles. What works for me, specifically at least, might not work for you, and vice versa. So I'm going to run through what I think are universal pros and cons, and then I'll color that up with some personal history. And I'll just tell you straight out that I don't think of physical gold and silver the way that I think of equities. I don't trade them according to price swings, and I'm not investing for quick growth. There are just easier ways to turn a quarter into a dollar, or a quarter into an ounce, however you want to look at it. I'm bringing this up early to let anyone who's new to the channel know that this is not a hype show. I'm not going to tell you that buying metals is the most important investment that you'll ever make. And I'd actually say that if you don't think of metals as an investment, you're probably in the right mindset. The English language is funny though. I have always used that word in my head. I invest in metals. I also invest in the markets and real estate businesses, even crypto. I invest in my kids' education. I invest in fun. So that word means a lot of different things. Some of those investments are dollar-denominated assets and some aren't. But at the bottom line, I can always look at my physical metals and I can determine the market value at any current time if I wanted to liquidate. So it's an investment or an asset or a savings. It just depends on how you use the words. I personally see it as all of the above. Now, the important thing for everyone to keep in mind is that you are buying an asset with a fluid price. So don't get caught up in the idea that they're going to the moon like some of your speculative investments. And keep in mind that prices can go three directions. They can go up, they can go down, or they can go sideways. They won't always track inflation or money supply or any of the things that you'll commonly hear. Sometimes it just feels like three blind mice. Now, all of that is just a good realistic expectation to have to keep your mind clear, because some of the upsides to metals may not ever present themselves, at least not in a way that you can profit from. There are bad circumstances that would probably be very good for the price of gold, but you probably also don't want those circumstances to happen. So if you start from that understanding, really, it's all positive from there. Okay, so the first big benefit to physical metals, and I'm going to use gold and silver interchangeably to begin here, is its role as a savings account. You heard me rattle off some of the different asset classes that I invest in. You heard me include fun in there too. At 45-ish, I have a reasonable amount of cash savings now. But saving money has never been my favorite thing. I'd rather have available cash being invested in a way that's making more of itself. And I also like to use it for other fun stuff as well. That really hasn't changed over time. I just have a little bit more stashed away today than I did, say, 15 years ago. At that point, in my 30-ish years, I was probably flying fast and low. I was probably just lucky that I didn't run into much trouble because I didn't save first. I saved what was left. I think a lot of people do that. I have a lot of friends who like to say, you can't take it with you, and I used to hear that a lot more in my younger years. Now, I didn't use that one personally, but it's probably not real far off from what I was thinking 15 years ago. When you're younger, it's just harder to see the forest for the trees. I think retirement is the forest, and the toys and the shiny things, well, they can be pretty big trees. So I started investing in metals in the most basic way possible. That was 14 years ago. That'll be relevant here in a minute. If I had extra cash, I bought some silver and gold too, but that was at a much different pace. I got to where I would stop by the local coin shop if I had $40, $80, whatever, and I'd grab as many American Silver Eagles as I could. And then I saved up and I grabbed a gold Canadian Maple Leaf and then an American Gold Eagle, but that took a lot longer. I had to window shop for those. Well, I got the cash and the nerve together. It wasn't long though before I felt like I wanted more than what I could buy with walking around money. So I started to budget for it. And I think that's where I started to look at it as an investment. And that's also coincidentally when the price started to skyrocket in 2011. So looking at it more like an investment and not in the sense that I was hoping for those quick gains, just in the sense that I could grow my savings. I was watching charts and I was doing all the things that you do when you're making trades. I was doing that research. So I started to watch the charts with silver and gold. And I also had that real experience of going to the local shops to pick up a silver eagle, and the price was increasing every time I went in. And because I was paying cash, it was very apparent. So that plus the charts eventually made me pump the brakes on those purchases. The price was just getting too hot all of a sudden, especially as I was paying more attention to what it was doing. It just felt too expensive to be buying. Even though I sat out most of that 2011 price run, my average cost on silver was in the mid-20s. It's probably even inching up into the high 20s. I didn't buy any gold into that run though, so I was a lot better off there. So I had that marker. I knew what my average cost was. And when the price fell in 2013 back to the low 20s, well, I started to come back in. It had lost 50% of its highs from 2011. So at that point, I thought it had probably found a floor. Now, I didn't have a high average cost for gold, but it was doing more or less the same thing. It was coming down over the same period of time. So July of 2013 is when I started buying that monthly quarter ounce of gold that I've talked about. And that at the time felt like it was going to be a good long-term investment to me. So I set up a budget and just allocated cash to it, a lot like I did with my retirement accounts. So at that point, I was a little bit more suspicious about silver. And those purchases for me, I didn't quit, but they were extra. I'd get on kicks, I'd pick up a tube of Eagles now and then, but mostly it was just spending pocket money when it was convenient. And I had other sporadic purchases over those years as well, as buying 20 Francs Roosters early into that, kind of got sucked into that as well. And then I purchased some larger pieces over time, but mostly I was just buying American Gold Eagles and American Silver Eagles. And I had a few sales over the years, and I found out that there is a big difference on selling certain types of gold. So I went years only buying Eagles. And if I was to look back and say what worked out best for me, well, that was it. Consistent purchases of the most popular bullion at the time. So I don't think the vocabulary is important if you understand that metals are typically pretty slow movers and that there are price runs and there are corrections along the way. But 14 years in now, with a few years sitting out, 2011, 2012, I'd say my decision to allocate cash to physical metals has worked out well. That budgeting kept me from stealing money from other investments. And if I was buying like it was when I first started, just basically spending money anytime I had it, everything I think would have gone a little bit differently. Like I mentioned earlier, I was investing in real estate and other asset classes all along. And if I had been stealing all of my discretionary income, putting it all toward metals, then I wouldn't have gotten in on my best performing assets in terms of value. So that budgeting was really important. My metals budget was more about cutting out unnecessary expenses for ongoing purchases and then making a few bigger buys only when I could, when it was comfortable. So in that regard, it's worked out to be a lot like a savings account. You even heard me say that I sold some down twice to free up some capital. So fast forward to today, I have a significant asset value in gold. If an issue came up, it's not something that happened overnight. There was no 10x moonshot along the way, but it was fun and it was relatively painless the entire time. So when I think about where I'm at today with it, I'd say it was a good investment, regardless of how we use that word. So talking about physical metals, generally speaking, and then getting back to the reason for the video in the first place, buying precious metals gives you stored value in something that's easy to sell. So because of that, it's a lot like a savings account. And I started buying when gold was somewhere around $1,000 an ounce. So there's the long-term growth as well. Add to that it's just a hedge against economic issues. We can see that playing out right now. And it's also a good way to keep an asset outside of the banking system if that's important to you. And beyond that, it's just kind of fun. It's a lot more interesting than moving numbers around in a bank account. So there are a lot of reasons to do it that don't depend on an unlikely moonshot. I'm sure we'd all take that moonshot though, if it does come. Okay, so let's call it good there. Let us know what you think, whether you're new or you've been at this for a while. I know there are a lot of people still deciding, so it's just good to get some thoughts from more people than just me. And while you're in the comments, the like button is just above it, so be sure to hit that if you found any of this interesting. Make sure you're subscribed if you're into the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.